In many ways, The Goldfinch approximates what we normally think of as a movie. There are actors, some good ones too, well known and less so. There is music, there is furniture, there are themes and feelings like loss and grief and the love of beauty and the pleasures of taking drugs, smoking cigarettes, and looking attractive, all at once and in succession. Finn Wolfhard, from the It films and Stranger Things, plays Boris like a Slavic androgynous Betty Davis. Theo, now played by Ansel Elgort, brings an incongruous meathead energy to the proceedings. Beautifully filmed, yet mostly inert, The Goldfinch mishandles its source material, flattening a complex narrative into a largely uninvolving disappointment. As a cinematic viewing experience, however, The Goldfinch is a total non-event. It's as though someone has snuck into a museum undetected and cracked open an airtight cabinet containing a precious artifact, and all the oxygen in the room has rushed in, instantly and terminally decaying it. The soul has been sucked out of the source text. It's a lot of soapy melodrama and underdeveloped characters that never really go anywhere. The Goldfinch should have never flown away from its literary perch. If Tart's book is about grief and the sudden trauma that can derail a life's trajectory, Crowley's film feels like it doesn't understand either of those things at all, merely using them as exploitative decoration on a beautiful but shockingly hollow experience. It looks and sounds like a movie without quite being one. It's more like a Pinterest page or a piece of fan art, the record of an enthusiasm that is, to the outside observer, indistinguishable from confusion. Overstuffed, overlong, and utterly uninvolving. This movie that feels as morbidly trapped as the poor little bird of its title. The only achievement in transferring The Goldfinch from page to screen is that it's a botched job for the ages. Hi, my name is Mary, and my favorite contemporary novel is Donna Tartt's The Goldfinch. Now, the movie was just about to come out in September, and I had promised myself I would not read any reviews, but while I was on Twitter, I looked in the Explore tab, and lo and behold, one of the major news headlines was about how every critic on the planet was panning The Goldfinch. Now that I've seen the movie and I've formulated my own opinions on it, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about how I, as a huge fan of the book, felt that it did not live up to the book. Now, first I'm going to talk a little bit about the book itself and what I perceive are the major themes in it, then I'm going to talk about what happened in the movie, and lastly I'll recommend what I would have done differently to hopefully preserve some of the magic of the book. So, before we get started, just to let you know, there are going to be spoilers both for the book, The Goldfinch, and for the movie within this video. First, let's talk about the book. Donna Tartt published The Goldfinch in 2013, and it won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 2014. Now, I had read Donna Tartt's book, The Secret History, last year, and didn't really care for it. It was the one that I had heard more people talking about, and I read it. It wasn't for me. However, going off of that, earlier this year in March, I picked up The Goldfinch because the premise of it sounded so up my alley. For those of you that are new to my channel, I'm an art historian, and art and the way that art impacts people is a major interest of mine, so of course I was willing to read a book about it. And very quickly, I realized that this book was something special. Most of my favorite novels are classics. It's not because I believe that contemporary novels are no good, but for the most part, the books that I find that stick with me, not just for the couple of months after I've read them, but for years and years, the books that I want to reread and come back to all happen to be classics. Things like Dracula by Bram Stoker, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. These are the books that I read and continue to come back to. So the fact that Donna Tartt's The Goldfinch is a book that I have read now twice and still feel very passionately about, I do feel comfortable saying it's my favorite contemporary novel. But let's talk about what it actually is about next. When people ask me what The Goldfinch is about, for the most part I try to give them like the sketch of the outline and then some of the major themes, but for the purposes of this video, let's talk about it. The book starts with a sequence in the present in which you can tell that a young man named Theodore Decker is absolutely emotionally devastated by something that is happening in the city of Amsterdam. However, this doesn't really reveal very much, and so we have to go back to his childhood. So the real opening of the book is when Theo is with his mother. Because he is about to have a disciplinary hearing at his school, they have decided to go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art to kill a little bit of time before the actual disciplinary hearing. They go to see an exhibition including a couple of very famous works of art and one that his mother is absolutely in love with, which is called The Goldfinch. So in front of this work of art, he is talking to his mother about it, and he sees a young girl named Pippa, and she is with an older man. However, tragedy strikes pretty much off the bat when a terrorist attack happens and a bomb goes off within the museum. This is the moment where I knew I was going to love the book. This sensory moment when Theo wakes up in this bombed out building. It is utter chaos. It is magnificently written. I knew it was going to be special from reading this part. However, when Theo is walking through trying to find his mother, he stumbles upon an older man who is giving him a ring. This man gives him a ring and tells him to bring it to a particular building in New York. So when he does that, he also picks up a painting called The Goldfinch, the one that they were looking at earlier, and takes it with him. He is totally and completely shell-shocked, but he is gripping onto this painting. Throughout the other events of this book, which mostly circle around his coming of age and his being bounced between various caretakers, including the wealthy, waspy family of a childhood friend, and then to his deadbeat dad in Las Vegas, Theo engages in a kind of downward spiral of moral culpability. Really, he struggles because of what he has taken from the museum, and also because of what he has lost in the form of the moral compass of his mother. So this drives him to engage in substance abuse and engage in other risky behaviors and in other illegal behaviors. So that's really the central theme of this book, is what happened to Theo from the time when he lost his moral driving compass in the form of his mother to the present when he is in Amsterdam. So over the course of that, you also get to see his unfortunate relationships with other people, his obsession with this girl named Pippa, who also survived the terrorist attack, and the ways that he has fixated upon her. This is not just any healthy, normal, loving crush. This is a fixation on her. He also fixates on Mrs. Barber, the mother of his childhood friend, as a maternal figure. And then, of course, he has Boris, his best friend that he meets in Las Vegas, who he thinks of as almost like a lifeline. These two young men who are really struggling with morality and with coming of age and with substances while they're in Las Vegas. But the point of that relationship being that Boris, the one he trusts the most, is the one who ends up betraying him and taking the Goldfinch. And so then it follows their attempts to get it back. Obviously, this doesn't touch on everything that's in the book, but this is what I think of as the main overarching plot and the main overarching themes of the book. You get into a lot more really exciting things, including some humorous and horribly emotionally devastating scenes that I think are just better to read on the page instead of me describing them. The other part of the story that I would think of as extremely important is Theo's relationship with Hobie, who is one of his caretakers during a part of the book, who teaches him about antique furniture and leads to his life of sales crime when Theo begins to deal antiques and deal forgeries. I don't think that The Goldfinch is a flawless book. However, I do think that it did three things that were really important for me as a reader. It had a central theme of moral uncertainty after tragedy that I thought was really meaningful and impactful to me. It also has that great aspect about the way that art captures people's emotions and that people form emotional attachments with art, and the way that those attachments with objects, with art, impact their relationships with other people. And then lastly, it's told in such a magnificently beautiful way. If you're a person like me who likes to write down quotes or get them on Goodreads while you are reading a book, The Goldfinch is really absolutely magnificent on that front. It is full of beautiful lines. Now let's talk about the movie. So, as I said, I was trying not to read any negative reviews, but I did see that it was being a little bit critically panned, so I went to see it on Friday. It opened in my area on Thursday, and we saw it on Friday. I went with my housemate, who is also an art historian, but who has never read the book. So we got her perspective and my perspective about the book. She was interesting to watch it with because she is a Dutch Golden Age specialist, which plays a huge part in this book, and so that's fun. We'll get to that in a second. In the film section, I will say I am not a movie critic, so we're going to try our best here with some of the terminology, but we're going to talk briefly about kind of the technical aspects of the movie, then we're going to talk about the writing and editing of the movie, and then lastly we're going to talk about the acting and directing. By technical aspects, I mean basically how the movie looks on the screen. So things like costumes and setting and soundtrack and things like that, like the presentation of it. And I would say that it was, for the most part, pretty good. I thought that the costumes in particular were beautiful, and the way that they really spoke to the characters and told you a little bit about who these characters were and their personalities. I thought that was great. I thought that the shots were beautiful. There is one in particular that I want to highlight as being a gorgeous shot, and for me that would be the shot when they are at the reception, the holiday party that's also like the engagement party between Theo and Kitsy. And in that, there's a shot where Theo and Kitsy are standing facing each other, and they're about to almost have an argument because Theo is about to leave, and between them you see Boris, and so Boris is this part that is kind of driving the two of them apart. Beautifully shot, thought it was great. I want to specifically compliment one set in particular that I was obsessed with. That was the Nevada set. Not inside the house, although, yes, but really like the outside of this desert development where they're totally McMansions, new development, totally abandoned in this like brown desert. It's amazing. The contrast between New York, where it's always colorful and busy and bustling, and then this Nevada hellscape. Fabulous. I thought that it was amazing. I really do think that this was a strength of the writing, where you can tell Donna Tartt is a total East Coaster through and through. She has like nothing but contempt for the West Coast and for Nevada and for Las Vegas. Very, very funny. But I do think that that translated really well, and it really helped to tell the story with images when they didn't have the time to say it with words. So that was very, very well done. I personally didn't really care for the soundtrack. I thought that some of the song choices that were not unique to the movie were a little bit strange. I thought that there was usually not enough music, especially during the really gripping emotional scenes. A lot of those scenes were quite quiet, which was very strange. It made them a little bit hard to understand what you were supposed to be getting out of these scenes, and I think they could have served a few more swelling orchestral sad songs during those scenes, basically, and basically it didn't do anything special and it didn't add anything, and I felt that the entire soundtrack probably needed an overhaul. So basically, for the technical aspects of the movie, I think it looked great on the screen. It's definitely something that people are going to be enjoying some of the gift sets from for a long time to come. Now let's talk about the writing and the editing. You might have heard that the editing of this particular movie was a little bit strange, and that is correct. Basically, they scrambled the chronology of the book. Now, let me walk you through that. As I mentioned at the beginning, we start The Goldfinch with a scene of Theo in Amsterdam as an adult. Then the rest of the story is told pretty much chronologically, but because it's told from the perspective of Theo in the present, it is told with a little bit of hindsight. but it still follows him mostly chronologically up to returning to the point where he is in the present in Amsterdam. It starts with the full description of the terrorist attack in the museum, including what they were doing there and why and how he felt. And so the strangest thing was done with the editing. Basically, they decided to split up that central scene, this first catalyst that starts all of the book, into several different sections, and the climax of that scene, which is Theo's mother's telling him that the Goldfinch is her favorite painting, and then us watching her walk away just to go back and look at it one more time while Theo is distracted by looking at this pretty girl Pippa, and then she dies, and there's an explosion and a terrorist attack. That is at the end. That is the final scene of the movie. So there's no context going up. I saw somebody posting online that they went with somebody who had also not read the book, who genuinely thought that the lead up, the climax of the movie was that Theo had caused the explosion, because it's not explained. And then there's a lot of like moral ambiguity, which is not at all explained in the course of the movie, which sounds bizarre, sounds very strange. I cannot fathom why this decision was made. I cannot understand it. When you're trying to translate this emotion, that this is a catalyst for his moral decline, for his spiral over the course of his life, I don't understand why you would not put that at the beginning and just leave it alone. It's a very strange decision. One of the best things about The Goldfinch, at least in my opinion, is that it is told from the first-person perspective by Theo, and it is told with a little bit of hindsight. So you really get his emotions in check. You really get a sense of how he feels over the course of all of the events that happen to him. You get a sense of his cyclical patterns of thought, of his obsession and compulsion. You get a sense of his depression and his fear and his inability to make meaningful connections with other people, and his disconnect, except in those really passionate, exciting moments when he does make a connection with another person. And the fact that there are very few monologues in the course of the movie was very strange to me. There are a few, including, there's a very strange monologue which attempts to kind of bridge the gap between Theo as a child and Theo as an adult, which he basically says what he's been up to. And the monologue starts, "I wear bespoke suits." And it is just the funniest thing. I genuinely started to laugh in the theater, which you were not supposed to do, because of all the monologues that you could have preserved, including my favorite, which I'll get to in a minute. Baffling to me that you chose, "I wear bespoke suits and talk to people I don't like." Very, very strange decision. So, anyway, that's kind of it for the writing. There is a little bit of strange dialogue, but I am unsure how that works when it comes to just whether the writing is bad or whether something was told to the actors on set. So let's talk about acting and directing next. There are some really good actors in the movie. I want to give a special shout out to Jeffrey Wright, who plays Hobie, who I thought was magnificent. I thought that Ansel Elgort did a great job as Theo. I thought that the young boy who played the young Theo, whose name escapes me, and the older Boris also did a very good job. I thought that Nicole Kidman did a great job, and Sarah Paulson did a great job. Basically, the actors were good. However, there is one actor who definitely struggled, and that was poor Finn Wolfhard. I will say, I think Finn Wolfhard is a wonderful actor. He did a great job in the It movies. He did a great job in Stranger Things. In this movie, he was asked to, one, have an accent, a very strange accent, which I know must be very difficult, especially for a younger actor. But then also, there are some very strange mannerisms with this character that I don't fully understand. There are some moments while watching the Finn Wolfhard scenes where you can kind of see, like, gears turning in his head when he is, like, it looks like he's buffering when he's about to say something, and I don't know if that's because he's trying to get the accent right, or if this was a mannerism that they ascribed to Boris, that he should just, like, buffer for a second before he responds to anything, or, like, have these very strange, like, ha-ha laughing sounds after everything, even stuff that isn't a joke. And so, watching him, it was a little bit painful. It was very, very strange. He's great at giving, like, I would call it, like, a soulful gaze. Oh, I guess in the book they call it the tender gaze. He gazes very tenderly at young Theo and does a great job at that. It's just something I think that they were telling him to do on set to characterize Boris did not work for me. Personally, I thought it was very, very strange. So, poor guy. I will say that once he got into the scene where they were on acid, did a great job. So maybe they, like, let loose with that and were letting him actually, like, act, but very, very strange. There's not much else, really, that I want to comment on in the acting. It's just that in particular made me struggle quite a bit. The other thing that I wanted to mention was Ansel Elgort has been getting a lot of flack recently because he did not like playing Theo, which, I understand. Theo is not a good person, and I would argue that that is something that sometimes the fan base forgets, that both Boris and Theo are not good people. Right, I mean, they're traumatized, so it's not like they have to be good people or that we should morally condemn them or anything, but sometimes when you have to, I guess, embody this character, I would agree that he's probably not a great person, so I don't judge him for that. I also did not think that the incongruous meathead energy quote from the review at the beginning was fair. I think he did a very good job as playing Theo, kind of like he's got a stick up his butt. Like, he should be a little bit, unfortunate, a little bit stiff and unwilling to relate to other people and a little bit pretentious. I think that's fair enough. So, the acting, for the most part, pretty good. Couple of stumbling blocks, but nothing incomprehensible. So the director John Crowley said in an interview before the movie came out that he was really not going to focus as much on Theo and Boris's romantic and sexual relationship. And of course, everyone cried homophobia. But watching this movie, very, very strange that supposedly that's how he feels about it. The thing is that during the course of the movie, he took out the kiss between Pippa and Theo. He took out Boris's girlfriend Kotku from the beginning, and then he took out his wife. And then he kept in the scenes, Potter is only me, that scene, when they're basically cuddling when they're children. And then he also kept in, like, the head touch, and what a strange decision to make. If you say that is not a sincere part of the movie that you want to convey, if you say it's not important, but you still make those editing and directing decisions, I don't fully understand it. Then I will say to all of you out there who are disappointed by that, just know that the actors are all on board, and it really does seem like Anjorin Barnard, who played Boris, and Ansel Elgort, they really made an effort to look like they were in love. I think that watching interviews of them, some of which I will link down below, I think you can really tell that they are totally on board with the Theo-Boris relationship, and they play to that, they act to that, and so it comes across in the movie, whether John Crowley wants it to or not. Alright, let's fix the Goldfinch. Let's talk about what I would have done. I just have a couple of points here that I really want to hammer home, because I disagree with many of the arguments that people have made that this needed to be a longer movie or a mini-series. I personally don't agree. The movie is 2.5 hours long. You can tell amazing stories in that amount of time. It's just about how you pace them. So the first thing that I would have done would be, of course, to string everything in order, just like it's in the book. It's perfectly fine, just like it's in the book. The thing is that when you split up the central catalyst, you spend so much time trying to justify how this character is feeling and acting without giving away the ending, and I think that wastes time. Whereas if you had had the museum saying from front to back, like from top to bottom, in the beginning, they could have saved a lot of time of trying to, trying to justify Theo's actions. It would have been a lot more self-explanatory throughout the rest of the movie. So, thing number one, put it back in order. Thing number two that I absolutely would have done would be to hire Donna Tartt to write you some monologues. This book, as a movie, needed monologues because the book lives or dies on Theo's cyclical patterns of thought and his self-justification and his emotional and mental struggles. Cutting those out is nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. So personally, if I were to adapt this myself, I would have added in the monologues where Theo explains his feelings about Boris. I would have added in the monologues where Theo self-justifies his sales behavior and his selling antiques, selling forgeries of antiques. I would have added the monologue where he explains his feelings about Mrs. Barber and the feelings about why he decides to become engaged with Kitsy. Would have added that as a monologue. And lastly, I would have added the final monologue of the book, which is my favorite piece of writing that I think I have ever read. I think it is better than anything else I've read, and for me as an art historian, the final monologue is really magnificent. This is the one that starts on the final page about how life, whatever it is short, and ends with, of course, "And I add my own love to the history of people who have loved beautiful things and looked out for them and pulled them from the fire and sought them when they were lost and tried to preserve them and save them while passing them along literally from hand to hand, singing out brilliantly from the wreck of time to the next generation of lovers and the next." That is the only way to end the book. It could not have ended any other way, and having that not be the end of the story to me is very, very strange. Sorry, editing Mary here. Just wanted to also add that I would have done the monologue where he explains how he feels about the Goldfinch and visiting the Goldfinch while it is in storage. That would have also been great. So, monologues. I need the monologue. Tying into the monologue scene, something very strange happened with the climax of this movie, which really felt like they were running out of time to give us an actual climax. So, once they get to Amsterdam, Theo and Boris go in search of the painting, and they are trying to find this painting, and I think that the movie really misses out by not showing how grungy and dirty Boris's, life is now, the places that he goes to find this painting. So, basically, monologues. I need the monologue. Tying into the monologue scene, something very strange happened with the climax of this movie, which really felt like they were running out of time to give us an actual climax. So, once they get to Amsterdam, Theo and Boris go in search of the painting, and they are trying to find this painting, and I think that the movie really misses out by not showing how grungy and dirty Boris's, life is now, the places that he goes to find this painting. So basically, I would have added in just a couple of scenes, didn't need to be long, could be a montage of that, but the most important thing would have been the monologue during Theo's suicide attempt. That, to me, the suicide attempt didn't make any sense because it was not thoroughly explained. They had him narrating the letters that he was writing, but in such a way that they cut out what was actually important. This is the moment in the book where Donna Tartt really shows us what she knows about existentialism, in the existential philosophy sense, really shows what she thinks about this character and his inability to form meaningful connections to happiness because of the loss of his mother. And I think that not having that was very, very strange. Especially because once he gets out of that and Boris walks him back and forth in the snow, one of my favorite scenes of the movie adaptation, Boris just basically tells him, "Oh, we got it back. We fixed it." So, without having that total breakdown and collapse explained fully as a climax like it is in the book, the climax of the movie becomes just something that happens off screen that Theo isn't a part of and that we're just told about, and it is very emotionally inert. I will borrow the phrase from the reviews I read earlier. It's very inert. So we really need more from that final act of the book. Another scene that desperately needs to be fixed is Theo returning to the Barbers after Andy has died. That scene was so strange. It needed music, it needed emotion. It's really just Theo and Platt drinking at a bar and talking about bipolar disorder and death, and they both just kind of stare blankly at each other in ways that I thought was maybe supposed to be meaningful but really wasn't. Like, of all the times to cry in the movie, this should be like tears, or a monologue, or an interior monologue, or something, swelling orchestral music, something to really fix that part of the movie, because it is very strange, and Andy's presence in the movie is really downplayed in order to upplay Mrs. Barber, played by Nicole Kidman, and I don't know if they just wanted to give her as much screen time as possible, don't know what that was about, but the scene doesn't make any sense if you don't get a better sense of Andy and Theo's relationship, which is very much glossed over. So that's kind of my feelings on that. Like, the whole Platt thing probably could have gone. I will say that the relationships that Theo has between Pippa and himself with Kitsy, I feel like could have used a little bit of work. Again, I keep coming back to the monologue thing, but when you don't understand that his relationship with Pippa is not just like romantic love or a crush, but is rather a real sense of obsession with this person as an object, it doesn't make a lot of sense when you kind of contrast that with the very much, I would say, practical relationship that he develops with Kitsy. And the movie makes it seem as if it is Kitsy's fault, and Kitsy is the one who's trying to convince him, oh, this is for Mom, we're doing this for Mom, we're doing this because it makes sense, we're doing this because it's practical. Whereas in the book, Theo is an active participant in this relationship. He is not just going along with it. He sees that it makes sense too. Because he knows that that the relationship he has with Pippa is untenable, that it's not going to work. So that, to me, could have made a little bit more sense, developed over time. I found a big one. So they took out Kotku, and they took out Boris's wife. I don't know how I feel about that. On the one hand, I agree that it's not central to Theo's narrative, and so maybe it makes sense to cut it. But here's why I think it's important in the book. Boris is not a great person. Boris is a gun-toting Russian gangster, is how I always prefer to say it. And so the, fandom with the ooh-woo, my, poor son thing doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. However, one of the scenes that really should impress upon you the parallels between Boris and Theo is Boris's obsession with Kotku. So when Boris is a young man and they're in high school, Boris starts to date Kotku, who is a young girl. He perceives that she's cheating on him, and he perceives that she's being unfaithful, and he announces to Theo that he wants to kill her. He wants to kill Kotku. What this does, in a narrative sense, is that it creates a parallel between Boris's obsessive behavior with this young woman and Theo's obsessive behavior with Pippa. It's not the same. Theo doesn't ever announce that he's going to kill Pippa, or that he wants to, or that he wants to control her, but it creates a narrative parallel where these young men develop these kinds of emotional attachments in very unhealthy ways with the women in their lives. Secondly, the fact that Boris has a wife and children before they reunite in the second act, it creates a narrative parallel with Kitsy and Theo, where they are both trying to set themselves up on very straight lines and do things that are not necessarily for their immediate emotional gratification, unlike everything else that they've done in the past. This is the one thing where they both think, I'm going to do this not for myself, but for other people. Do it even if it doesn't really make me happy, because what makes me happy as a character doesn't seem to be working out. What makes me happy as a character is not healthy, and it's not good for me. That parallel is very important. So I understand from a logical perspective, but I think if you can have 60 different shots of Nicole Kidman staring at Theo, just kind of going at this young boy, I think you can fit in some sort of parallel between the two of them, because I think that is really important to the development of their characters. I think I would have picked either the Kotku thing, or I would have picked the marriage thing for Boris and kept that in. Probably the Kotku thing, because I would have liked to see more of Theo's obsessive behavior about Pippa. I would have preferred to see that parallel very strongly. And that's what I would have added. So my final concluding thoughts. Some people will probably write down in the comments that a movie adaptation does not have to be 100% faithful to the book, and you know what? I absolutely agree. I think that there are things in movie adaptations that you can do that are different than what you can do in a book. There's things that movies can do that books can't do, and vice versa. However, I think that when you're making a movie adaptation, you should take full advantage of those things whenever you make a change from the source material. And I do think that in the case of the Goldfinch, many of the choices that were made in the translation of it from book to cinema were not great choices, and they negatively impacted the message and the emotional resonance of the book. So that's basically how I feel about it. I think that it failed in that regard. That being said, my friend who I saw it with, my housemate, who has never read the book before, said she really enjoyed it. She really enjoyed watching the movie, and now she's going to read the book. Hopefully she likes the book better. We'll see. We're both graduate students, so we don't have any time, so she might not read this for like months and months, but whatever, it's fine. So, those were my thoughts. If you enjoyed the movie, I think that's perfectly fine. However, if you have seen it and you want to let me know what you thought of the Goldfinch, please do so in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching. Bye!